Unahaging Nasingas, Anapechu, Nabi. Welcome back, everyone, to Rising Warriors, Rachael Kulei. I am Nabi Miyadachina, which is a woman who travels with the stars. And I am affiliated with the Northwest Band Shoshone, and I come from a long lines of chiefs on both sides. And today I have my beautiful sister back with me again, Stephanie Big Eagle, also author. Check out her book. It's a beautiful book. I'm enjoying it. And today we decided that we were going to come on and talk about empowerment going into the new year. And we've been speaking on different things. So stay tuned throughout the year because we're going to be coming back on and talking about various topics and things that we both feel that needs to be talked about and sharing our voices in those ways. So I asked sister over here what she would like to talk about today. And today she said empowerment. And I thought that was just perfect with going along with the last episode of cutting cords and releasing cords and curses and going into the empowerment part of life and empowering ourselves and others and things that go through that. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie. Go ahead and introduce yourself for those who may not know you and your people and where you come from, and take it away.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Big Eagle, and Wakia Itachawia, leading Thunderbird woman, and my father is Lakota and Dakota, and my mother is Nordic and Mohawk. So I am an author, Thunderbird Rising. I've been an environmental and Indigenous activist for many years, and as of lately, I have personally been struggling through a lot of the transitions or transformations that we're all going through. 2020 was a difficult year, but also a beautiful, beautiful blessing of a year. And let's see, this time last year, exactly to this day, I was leaving where I used to live in Sedona, Arizona, and I was making my way out here to reclaim this part of my life that had been taken from me, which was my 3 older children. And I had to give everything. I had to sacrifice everything and come to them. For many years, I was trying to get my kids to come to me. And finally, I realized it's not going to happen. I just have to go. I have to give up these dreams of living out in the country or in these beautiful landscapes that I wanted to bring my children to. And instead, I had to come to the city, come to kind of like the hood, and just make a home here for my children so that I could at least just be a presence in their everyday life before it's too late. So that was a year ago today. And so there's this topic that comes up in my mind of the intergenerational trauma that we deal with as Native people. And it's not just Native people that deal with it, but there's a lot of people who's dealing it with, but the way I can speak of is what I know from my own ancestral line and the things that I carry as a result of what our ancestors have been through, particularly within the last few generations of the residential school era, the boarding school era, the physical genocide and the continued cultural genocide that we're going through. And so how do we deal with those issues that keep getting passed down in our ancestral lines, and how do we empower ourselves to as you were talking about the other day on your podcast, cutting cords and releasing ourselves from these issues that have been passed down in our lines. So something that came up for me that really, it was very difficult for me to do, but I think it really, really helped me over the last couple of days and over 2019, I wrote my book. So that was about going into my own past in this lifetime and looking at sharing all the things that I've been through in my life, all of the things I've survived, and sharing that, going through it, moving through it, looking into it, and trying to come from a fresh perspective and say, this is what I went through, this is how I survived, and just moving through it. And after I did that, it was like I was free to go and move out here and be with my older kids.
Right.
Now I'm looking at what else can I do to look deeper into my history, which is my DNA, my that intergenerational trauma. So my father is a boarding school survivor, my grandmother boarding schools,
Mhm.
and it goes back and back into the lines. And I'm not even sure through my mother's lines the things that she has been through and our family has been through there.
Mhm.
But one of the ways that I'm looking into that is to start listening and seeking out these stories that from our relatives of what they went through the boarding schools,
Mhm. Mhm.
through the residential schools. So I've been watching all the movies that I can about it, listening to the stories of these elders, and talking to my family about it, those who are ready to talk about it, because unfortunately, all aren't ready to talk. They can't talk about it. It's
Mhm.
too much, it's too traumatizing. But I feel like since I've done that in the last couple of days, I feel like there was this information that was passed on to me that part of our healing is we have to look into that. We have to listen to the stories, even if they're not our blood relatives, but the movies that's out there, like Indian Horse or We Were Children, or these documentaries that are out there about the boarding schools. We have, if that's in our bloodline, we have to look into it. Because if we're strong enough to look into that, then we can help our relatives carry that pain and trauma so they don't have to carry it alone. And I think that's part of the problem, is trying to carry all of this stuff alone is too much.
Mhm.
And that's part of this empowerment, is carrying, helping one another to deal with it, to carry it. And by doing that, then all of us together are stronger than just one individual alone trying to carry that.
It's true, and then it's difficult too, because when you have this other intergenerational trauma that happens too, because and I know you get this too, but you get this there's like this backlash that we get for being in the city and not being on the reservation. And that, I've had many people over the time, just from doing my podcast, is like, well, you're not real native because you're not on the res, or you're not true native because you didn't go in the prison system, and you haven't suffered in these things. And it's like, well, I was taught through my grandparents, that we needed to be educated, that in order to empower our people and to keep our bloodline and to keep, our people alive, that we had to be educated, we had to learn, we had to adapt to these new ways. But I noticed there becomes this resistant um of that trauma, that's almost like, why do I need to go to school? Why do I need to learn the white education? Why do I need to do this? They took all of this from me. So it almost becomes this oxymoron in a way of shutting down education in such a way that can empower us, that can actually help us, help our families. And so like with my grandma, she started that. And so she, went away to the army, and then she went to college. And she was one of the first that graduated college in my family. And that was after the service. And so she understood what her grandpa was saying of going and educating, going and learning. And some of us, there's that warrior in that, of being able to be empowered to step out into the world. And a lot of people, I notice, they don't understand that it is difficult and it's more challenging living in the city as an indigenous, and it's harder to have your voice, and there's less of us. And if there is, a bunch of us, it's hard to find each other in the city, because we're all kind of hiding in our own way too. And so it's learning to also find that empowerment too, of reaching out in the communities, especially in the city. um, who are your other warriors that are out in the city? Who are those people that, the leaders that are stepping up out in the outside of Indian country, that are helping try to empower and helping, use their voice to bring education and awareness, kind of like what we're doing here. We're helping bringing that education and that awareness of what's going on, sharing the voice. And the other thing too is that if we don't talk about these things, then how is it going to ever happen? how are or the change is going to happen. And like what we've seen with 2020, so much change happened and people are so resistant to change, it becomes uncomfortable. But when that change happens, and that uncomfortable happens, that's when the change happens. And so on the global scale, everybody's being shooken up in a way that you have to have change. You're uncomfortable. So what are you going to do to get out of that? And now that's where another part of the empowerment comes of, finding that strength within you, finding those leaders, finding people around you. But then even then, as leaders, we also have to find other leaders that we can walk with to help empower each other. So like with Stephanie and I here, we keep tabs on each other, and we'll check in like, hey sister, what's going on? We'll give each other words of wisdom and advice to help empower each other to keep going, because a lot of people don't realize either that as leaders you get hit even harder. And I love this picture that I keep seeing. It's the image of these wolves. It's a pack of wolves going through the snow, but you see the one wolf in the very front, and he's the one that's carving the path and having to go through all of these trials, all of these hurdles, all like it's cold, and really just carving this path out so that people can come behind. So then it's easier for those that have gone through the trauma to be able to lead and go, okay, there is a path of hope to get to where you're going. So it's important to, for those that don't understand that leadership, to reach out to your leaders and to encourage them and give them that empowerment, because sometimes we feel that, what we're doing is like, maybe we should just be doing it and it's not having an impact or making a difference in any way. So then we start going through these self-sabotages in ways. But what's interesting too is that during those times, someone will actually start to reach out and just go, hey, you know what? I love what you're doing. And they give those words of empowerment and encouragement that sometimes it just takes one person just to say, just keep going. And you're like, all right, okay, we can keep going. We can keep doing this. And especially as leaders, being able to help each other, carve those paths, especially in generational trauma. So what are ways that you can think of that we can, as a collective, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, empower each other through, difficult times?
Well, I think sharing our stories, opening up is something that we really need to do on as many levels as we can. And so me writing my book was me opening up to my past and the things that I tried to bury for so long. So not everybody has been through the same amount of trauma, say, as I have been. But that's what worked for me, is to go back and to look back into those stories, to open up not only to everybody who's going to read that book, but at the time it was just me going back into my life story, going back into that trauma, looking at it again, and crying again, feeling those feelings again. But in doing so, you open up something that you buried, and then you get to invite in healing from a safe space. So I was no longer going through that trauma that I was at the moments that I was writing about. So when I go in from a safe place and look at it again, then I have the chance to open up to Creator, to my spirit helpers, or whatever you want to say that is. You get to open up those times in your past, in history, to be re-looked at, re-examined, and to actually have real healing. So I think that we have a lot of root issues and traumas as Native people, and everybody has this at some point in their history, in their genetic line. It came for us more recently than it did for, let's say, your Indigenous Europeans. They experienced it far back in their genetic line. So there is intergenerational trauma that has to be looked at, and that is about addressing the truth, going back and saying, let's look at these stories, let's address these stories, and let's bring the light to the darkness by Let's look at the truth and about what really happened. And when we do that, we open up those channels for true healing, because you can't just put a band-aid on things. You can't just take medications. You can't, if you're using drugs or alcohol to numb the pain, you're never gonna get better. You have to be able to honestly address those things. And so that's why I've been, over the last few days, watching these stories about the residential schools and boarding schools, because I know that that affects me in my life. Even though I didn't go to the boarding schools, it's why the things happen with my dad and me. You know, that when I was a little girl, those things that happened, that's a direct cause of those boarding schools and the environment that he was steeped in on the reservation. Let's look at reservations themselves.
Yeah.
So that issue that you were saying, where people are saying that you're not real native because you're not on the res, but okay, how did the res get started in the first place? Okay, that's the first prisoner of war camps in the Americas, was the reservations. We used to be everywhere here. And so we each have our role and our place and our position here in order to do the work that we're doing. And I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana. There's almost no other natives out here. I mean, I have to hold it down. And so we have to go to all of these areas that we used to be. And we have to say our prayers and hold our energy in those spaces. And so that's part of the empowerment too, is taking, no matter where we are, holding our value for ourselves and what we've been through. We're no more or less than anybody else. We all have a role, but we all have to help each other carry that and lift each other up. And we can only do that when we start to share and open up, not only to ourselves and to Creator, but to our community and our relatives and our friends. And social media is a great way to do that. That's how I started, just starting sharing my stories on social media. And then when you do that, you give others permission and inspiration to do the same.
And that's another form of empowerment. That's what I love, because it's that other way of empowering others to start speaking up and sharing your voice. And I I always like, taking a step and kind of looking into other people's shoes, because like you were just saying, it's everybody has trauma, but like someone said over here, it's like, it's hard to compare the trauma. And it's true, because my trauma for me could be the worst trauma in the world. And some of it for you, it may have not been that bad. And so there's like, how do you, because of your life and because of your ancestors and things, it's like, it's hard to be able to go, well, mine is worse than yours. Well, you don't know. We all are given, Creator gives us our own capacity of what we can handle, and Creator knows each one of us and how much we can handle and how much we can't handle. So my threshold could be way more intense than someone else and one of my friends, or and yours could be more than mine. But at the same time, that's our own journey, and it's our own trials that we're going through. So at the same time, they are the same in a sense of that trauma. And so I think too is like helping, like everybody getting out of that mindset of, well, my trauma is worse than yours. Well, my trauma is worse than yours. And by having this, it actually starts creating these blocks and these barriers to actually start being able to share your voice, to be able to share that trauma and open up with someone, because now you just have this battle of, well, mine's worse than yours. Well, mine's worse than yours. And it's like, how about we step back and we recognize, and because when we're dealing with trauma, especially when we start getting into that like battle mindset of like, well, I want to be heard. Well, that's exactly what it is we want to be heard. And so it's not like we're saying my trauma is worse than yours. It's more like, my trauma is really heavy shit right now, and I need somebody to talk to and someone to just hear me. I just need someone to hear me. And I've been to that place before, when it was just when I was really abused in my ex marriage. There was points where I just wanted to be heard. I didn't want anybody to like have this battle of, well, my pain's worse than yours or anything like that, or compare or anything. It was just, I just wanted someone to just hear me and just go, I hear your story and I understand. And, having that sympathy. And that, I think that's where we lack too, is that we don't have that sympathy for others. So then how can we put that guard down and be vulnerable with each other and sharing that story, unless you let that down and put that down and come with open heart and open ears to be able to hear someone else. If you don't want, if you're not going to be able to really connect with someone and share your story if you're not being receptive yourself, and putting those barriers down, and also letting that other person have that exchange with you, because you also need to have that exchange where, and that's that's that Indigenous, and what we're taught is you have that exchange. It's like, I will share my story and then you share your story, and we can listen to each other and we can talk. And that's how that other form of empowerment comes, because now we start to understand our stories. And then if we go into like the racial things, a lot of white people don't want to address the trauma that their ancestors did. But unless we're going to create some type of shift and melting pot even more, where we can blend together and be on the same page together, you have to also address your issues from your ancestors and make those things right. It's not fair that us Indigenous are the only ones out here that are trying to make peace, and we're working on the forgiveness of what your ancestors did to us. We could have easily slaughtered every single white person that came here into the country, United States, when they came over that ship. But that's, we don't own that entitlement of the land. We're caretakers of the land. And so we understood that part, that we accept and we bring in whatever background you come from. So it's almost like that shift needs to happen, where it's on the other side too. We're doing this, and for you, we're working on our trauma, we're working on our ancestral healing and the genocide and the generational trauma, and we're working on helping, trying to fix the prison system that was, our own slavery of things. And so you have to be able to put your guard down, or we're not going to be able to hear each other's stories. We're not. And you have to be able to be vulnerable. And losing the judgment, that's the other big thing I see too, is that judgment, and people having harsh judgment, when it's not our job to judge others. It's creator's job to judge others and to sit in that judgment seat. It's not our job. It's our job to love and understand, and to have that compassion, and to help our brothers and sisters, and to empower our brothers and sisters, and not shove each other down, especially if we're wanting to move forward in growth. And as a collective, we have to all be able to do this together, and face the trauma head on. It's work. But like I was telling a woman yesterday, if we can all really at this time take that time to focus internally and work on yourself, and really look in the mirror and take a hard look at yourself in the mirror, and look down the generational, because you have I like the mirrors that have it back to back, because it's the infinity mirror and it kind of goes back. And so it's almost like imagining you're staring into that infinity mirror, but you're also looking down the line of your ancestors, of things that are in you, of them. And so now you got to take a look at that view, and you got to take a look of each ancestor going down that line, to be able to go and address that trauma, to be able to do the internal work, and do that healing. Because if we keep going around and playing the victim card, well, you did this, well, you did this, well, you did this, then you're not going to actually take any accountability of your own self. I've been on both sides of like an abusive relationship, and I've been in where I went and attacked and went back and just pushed and pushed and pushed, but it didn't get anywhere. And all it did was just cause more friction, more tension, and more arguing, and we never heard each other. We could not hear on the same page. And then it was, you know, my ancestral trauma is worse than yours. Well, mine's worse than yours. And so with my ex, it started becoming this battle of the Shoshone versus the Navajo of, who's right, and, whose trauma's worse. And there was never hearing each other. So we weren't able to actually really look at our own selves to be able to do that healing, to be able to come together and go, okay, this is where the trauma comes from. This is ancestral from here. So now we addressed it. Now, how do we move forward? How do we work on this together? How do I make, okay, say my ancestors did something to your ancestors way back then. Now I see it, I recognize it. So now what can I do to give you that offering? What can I do to make that peace with you and your ancestors in that line, to better the future, so we can cut those cords, so we can cut the curses, we can cut the ties, and be able to have that empowering, the empowerment to be able to move forward in that healing.
So there is something that reminds me of maybe a month or two ago, I was in a ceremony, just a ceremony I was having by myself, and I received that information, or that message was that there are people that I've hurt in my life, and as a result of all the things that I've been through, there were things that I was doing as in reaction to that I didn't even realize that I was doing, that I was hurting people. And as soon as I realized that I was hurting those people, at first I felt really ashamed and things, and then I was given the message that, well, how do I fix that? I asked, how do I fix that? How do I correct that? And I was given the message that you have to pray for them. You have to pray for everybody that you hurt in this lifetime. You have to pray for them. And everybody that's come into our lives, whether they hurt us, or it was an abusive relationship, or anything like that, even the people who came into our lives that was a good interaction, we have to pray for everybody that was in our lives, and our children, our relatives, everyone. That's how our ancestors taught us, was that our prayers are the ways that we keep balance. So we pray for our relatives, which is our human nation. We are all relatives, whether we want to be or not. We're all here on the same earth. And so when we move past this competitive place, and we start realizing our connection to one another, then we can start healing in a way that we're offering up good intentions and thoughts and prayers for one another. And that's how we can correct the things that we've done in our own lives that we feel ashamed of, that we want to make it right. Pray for those people that you hurt, and you don't even have to talk to them ever again, but spiritually you're doing it on another level, where you're correcting that between your ancestors and that spiritual plane. And then on another way, when you're going back and you're praying for your ancestors, and you're looking into the trauma of the past, and you pray for your ancestors and everything that they've been through, and you look at the true history, and you help them carry it. So that's what I got. And then when we get to there's that Lakota prayer, that Mitakuye Oyase, which is we are all connected. And that includes the plant, animal, elemental, spirit nations, star nations. We are all intricately connected. And 19 generations ago, White Buffalo Woman came to our people, and she left us all of these teachings and that pipe and our ceremonies. And she said that there would come a time that the peace that we had then, and that it would all be taken, and that a disease of separation would come upon the earth, and it would spread everywhere, and that our people, Native people, would lose almost everything to it. So that disease of separation, we see it's in full force right now. Mm-hmm. And so we see that spiritual battle happening between this cloud of darkness that's upon the earth right now, that keeps everybody trying its best to keep everybody separated. And so that's part of the empowerment, is realizing our connection to one another, trying to drop that competition, or the jealousy, the anger, the rage, and these things which are very difficult to overcome. It is not easy because that presence is so strong, and it's been drilled into us since we came into this life and before. So for generations, we've been dealing with this disease, and most people don't even realize that it's in them. And so that's part of the things that we have to go deep within. We have to honor that and recognize that and pray for our relatives. And one thing I've noticed, well, you're in Oregon, right?
Yeah.
So they've legalized psilocybin there.
Yes.
And in my own personal experiences, that is one of the big medicines that we can start to turn to for our empowerment that forces us to go in. And not only in this lifetime, but we can go and we can access other points in past lifetimes in our ancestral lines, that we can start to work on our trauma. And it will be shown to us, and it'll be harsh sometimes. We have to realize that truth. But those are some of the things that are available to us for our empowerment at this time. Things like the psilocybin medicines, things like the Native American church ceremonies, things like returning to our traditional ways, our traditional ceremonies. For me, Sundance was a huge part of my empowerment and my healing. Returning to the praying with the pipe. You know, all of these things are available to us. We just have to start picking it up and returning to it.
It's interesting you say returning to it, because one of my friends actually returned a sacred war bundle back to me the other day that has been lost from my family for generations. And which I'm going to share real quick about this is that you know how we were talking about the bloodline, the markings here on my tattoo, and how it if you were to look at it, it would actually show you my actual bloodline and where I come from and my people and things like that. Well, what's interesting is when this bundle was returned back to me, um, a lot of my markings were on every single one of these pieces that were returned back to me in the bundle. And so I kept hearing, look at your arm, look at that marking. These markings right here is proof that this belongs to you. And so it was just like all these different confirmations of things. But even then, she's Italian. So those out there that are not indigenous, that may have bought artifacts, that may have found and stumbled across, our sacred bundles, they deserve to be returned back to us. But the thing is that if you're that carrier and holding it right now and you're not indigenous and that does not belong to you, then it's your job to turn to creator and be guided like this woman was to me, to return this back to me. And as I was sitting there, I looked at her and I was like, what's interesting is that I saw my ancestors knew to leave this bundle at this one place at this one time, because this one person was going to come pick it up. Then this one person was going to handle it over to this area. And then this person was going to carry it to this person. And over time, it was going to get carried to their granddaughter. So it was like they knew. And so that's the other thing, is that we are the answers to our ancestors' prayers. That's the thing, is we are the prayers of our ancestors, and we are the answers to our ancestors' prayers. So what are we all doing together? And it's not, as yes, indigenous, but then all together, once upon a time, your ancestors prayed for you. So now it's our job to carry that and to keep that empowerment and moving forward. So now, if you want to go on a whole nother level of cutting cords and things, this is the time when you're able to face that trauma and really look at it head on. This is when you can actually start to cause the shift in your own family, in your own bloodline, in your own children, by releasing these curses and these cords so that they don't have to go through this trauma. And this is something that I've been watching with my niece, my sister being a rape victim, survivor, excuse me. She's a rape survivor. And going through her own healing of things, she has been able to cut cords and whatnot so that my little niece now doesn't have to experience that herself. She now no longer is carrying, before she was born, we worked on that healing so that when she was born into this life, she wasn't born with those curses. She wasn't born with that generational trauma. She wasn't born with the generational trauma of rape in the women of my family. It was cut off. So she's not going to have to experience that energy that attracts that in our bloodline through that trauma is no longer gone. It's been released. So if we want to really make an impact for the future, and like our ancestors pray for us, well, now we need to pray for our future generations too, and helping our future generations. And that starts with our little ones that, that are all running around, and they're these little warriors. And a lot of them, like us, when we came into the world, the veil was kind of forgotten or put over. So we have this forgetfulness, but a lot of these little warriors, they don't have time to forget. So I was told that when these little ones are coming into the world right now, they know exactly who they are. They didn't forget. And so it's up to us to recognize and to educate these little ones, because like my little niece, she's 2, and you would think she was 6 or even older than that because of how wise she is. But that's because how we're raising her. And that's the other thing, is it takes a tribe to raise, and it takes a tribe to help empower, to raise these little ones and to empower each other to keep going. And so, we need to really focus on our internal healing, and then, being able to clear those things so that we can stop the trauma, and so that our future generations don't have to go through this anymore, and our children don't have to go through this anymore. Then that gives me hope for a better future. And instead of where we are kind of right now, it scares me for the future. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to have children because of how the world is right now. I don't even know if I want to bring children into this world because of how it is. And that's sad to me, because I've always wanted to be a mother. But at the same time, that's the protective mother bear of me, where I'm like, I see what's going on out here, and I don't want them brought into this world like this. So it's up to us, and it's our responsibility to do this, where we've gone through this global shift, that we've gone through this awakening, and we can either waddle in our pain and feel bad and go through this pity party for ourselves, or you can actually let the being uncomfortable drive you and push you and move you forward and cause and change, and allow that to empower you for that change.
Yeah. I was noticing too, even within my own family, there's a choice that each and every one of us has, is that are we going to continue on that disease of separation within ourselves, which means are we going to choose to inflict what happened to us or the trauma that has been passed down to us? Are we going to inflict that and become that, causing harm and damage and further trauma to other people? Or are we going to choose instead to release it and transform it and come back into our true empowered selves? So now I'm even having to deal with that in my own family. And it's one of the reasons that lately, over the past week or so, that I was kind of I was going through a little bout of depression, because I was noticing that in my own family, that one of my closest relatives is becoming that, is becoming the trauma that he endured, is becoming the problem. And it's so, sometimes we see that happening, and it's really, it's a very unfortunate thing to see, but we keep praying for them. But that's another part of empowerment, is when we realize that there's that person in our life, even though they're our blood relative or someone that we've been involved with for years. We don't have to stay in a relationship with them. We can love them from afar. We can pray for them from afar, but we have that choice as well to say no. If they're making that choice to become that, then we have to remove ourselves from that situation for our own empowerment and for our own health and safety and well-being. So that's another thing, that some people aren't ever going to make that choice to be better. They're gonna be part of that other side. And that's where we're at in the world right now too, is people are making their choices. What side do they stand on? And so we have to be strong enough to allow those people, to let them go, no matter who they are.
And it can be challenging, especially because, like, I've noticed this since that eclipse that happened in 2017. There was a huge shift and divide that happened of good versus evil. And it was like anybody that was these fence sitters, they got flicked off on whatever side of the fence they were facing towards. It was like that's where their spirit was going, was on that path. And since then, I've been having to do exactly what you're saying right there. It's setting those healthy boundaries and having to learn how to love from afar. And it's hard. It's not easy. And especially when you're a kind-hearted person and you're a peacemaker, I mean, let me tell you, it is difficult to set those healthy boundaries when you just want to love and love and love and love. But at the same time, it's like they keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and it just drains you and it exhausts you. And then before you know it, you have no more to give except for to take what you gave back. And so that's part of taking that empowerment back with that too, is learning to say, you know what, I love you, but I can't be in your life right now while you're going down this path. And you know what? If things come together, we'll come back together. And I will always have that open heart. And this is how I am. I will always have open arms to you. If we go on a separation and you come back, I'll have those open arms. Because if you come back, then that shows that something changed and shifted, and you went on your path. And that's not my place to judge, but it is my place to set my own healthy boundaries and for my spiritual, mental, and emotional state, so that I don't get distraught and broken and heartbroken over the loss of somebody because they don't want to wake up. And we can get consumed in that and wanting to like really slap somebody, and only if they saw, only if they knew who they were, only if they could see this or understand this. And people, we all have to go through our own learning at our own times, and some learn faster and some learn slower. And as again, it's also now having that patience with that person too, and having that compassion, and not having harsh feelings. So when you let someone go that hurt you, not like, oh my goodness, I can never talk to them again and they're beneath me and all this. It's no, send them with love. I bless you on your journey. And I see that you're going to have a hard journey ahead of you. So I'm going to pray for you, for the strength that you'll be able to make through this journey of your lessons that you're about to go through. And I have to separate myself because I can't go on that roller coaster with you. And that's for my own health. And that doesn't make me a bad person by setting those boundaries. It's that I can't sacrifice my state of mind and my health and my spirituality to go down that road with you just so you're not alone. I've been down that road. I don't want to go down that road again. And it's taken a while to get to where I am now, even for me. So it's, you got to let those boundaries and those walls down in that sense too.
Yeah, that's part of our protection and empowerment too, is learning how to say no and to set those boundaries. And some of us were taught as children that we didn't have a choice, that we had to stay in those toxic environments and things. And like for me, I was in a toxic environment until I was 18 years old. It wasn't my choice. And so as adults, we do have that choice to have that empowerment to say no to those toxic situations. And sometimes we don't even realize that it's toxic. But if it doesn't make you feel good, if it's taking more from you than you are giving, if it makes you feel ugly, if you feel worthless, if you just feel like there's nothing you can do that's ever right, that's toxic. That's a very disempowered place to be, and it is okay to say no. And so sometimes that means you can say no to your mother, you can say no to your father, you can say no to your brother and sister, auntie, uncle. It doesn't, you are not obligated to anyone. If they're placing you in a toxic environment or situation, it's okay to say no for your own health and well-being. And that's how we empower ourselves. It's never an easy journey at this point in the
Yeah.
life that we're in. It is not easy, that path to empowerment. It takes many difficult choices and many courageous choices to get to that place. But we all do have that choice.
Hmm. We do. And that's, the other thing I want to say too is that I have to remind myself when I walk away from unhealthy people is that because I feel bad for hurting them by leaving, but I
Yeah.
have to remind myself they didn't care when to do all the things that caused me to leave. So why should I feel bad for having to set my healthy boundary and having to walk away when I'm saying no to the abuse?
True. And but that also takes me to another subject is that I like that movie The Matrix and that series.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so one thing that really sticks with me really well in drawing boundaries in my life and with people who are toxic is that so we see the agents that come in, right? And they can inhabit anyone who is still plugged into the system. In
Yep.
this case, we'll say anyone who is choosing to be on that side of darkness or to be toxic or to carry on the trauma. Those people, I think, can easily come into our lives and be inhabited by that energy, which is that disease of separation.
Hmm.
And those people can attack us through our loved ones who aren't taking the path of empowerment, but are taking that path towards the other side. And so I like to think that helps me because I don't like to look and think, oh my gosh, that's my relative and they're being so mean to, they're choosing that path. I just think, look, they're inhabited and it's not my fault, it's not their fault, but they are, and I have to step away from them. But it's a way of helping me to cope with it,
Yeah,
because if I don't take it so personally that way, and it helps me
exactly.
to say it's not them, it's not me, it's something else entirely, but I still have to move away
Hmm.
because that thing that's in them that's not them or me is going to try to hurt me.
Yeah.
And if I want to be on this path to empowerment, I have to move away even though it hurts, but and pray for that good part that still exists within deep down within each and every one of us, no
Mhm.
matter what the choices we made. There's that good aspect that every single one of us, no matter what point we are in our life, has the choice to go back to that. But until they do, look at it that way. It's not them.
Right. I like how you put that because it's so true. And it's like you and then it's almost like I find them like little puppets. It's like, oh, if you're not spiritually protecting yourself today, you're being used as a puppet to try to
Mhm.
do something. So then now it's also having the awareness. Now, that's the other thing is being able to have the awareness like the eagle and being able to fly above and not engage, because that's another whole thing that we could do. And another topic we could go on is engaging with that and knowing when to engage, not engage, and when to just fly above and rise above and realize that in engaging isn't going to solve anything.
Mhm.
And so that it then it can go into arguments and things like that. And especially when you can see things and the other person doesn't, and you're trying to explain something, it's almost like there's this block there again that keeps them from being able to even hear you. So there's just going to be, there's like, I find it in my own life, there's just ends up being this constant battle of going back and forth. So now it's learning when and knowing when to disengage and realize that if I engage, I'm literally just going to be wasting my time, my energy, and I'm going to give energy away that I can't get back in certain things. I'm going to have to go to the mountains. I'm going to have to go recharge. It's going to take me another day to recoup from this engagement. So then now looking at, your own peace of mind and your state of health, and is it worth engaging back in with that person, if they're still being that toxic person and not empowering you and trying to take that empowerment from you, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people. surrounding yourself with, people that are empowering, that, have that same mindset of goals that you're trying to go to. That's a huge thing, especially if you're wanting to make the shift and you're not wanting to stay stagnant, and you're wanting to make a difference, and we'll look at that internal healing and things like that. Then you'll start attracting to others that are also on that path and that journey too. So then you can start sharing your story. Then that's another form of empowerment.
Mm.
So, got to be vulnerable too. But if you can attract that energy. So I like to think of, because if whatever we put into the universe, that law of attraction. So if I'm putting into the universe that I want, more leaders, like-minded leaders, I want people that are going through the change. And so that I know that I'm not going through this by myself, and that we're in this together. And when you know that we're together, even though you're way over there in Indianapolis, but at the same time, it empowers me that I know that we're moving, we're together, we're on this journey together, and we're not alone. Even though we're across the United States from each other, we're still sharing that empowerment and helping each other. So I think I just want to leave with that. And if there's anything that you want, any last words you want to leave with.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say too is sometimes we don't have access to the other people, even though if say we're separate, but we want to have something close to us to work with our hands or anything to help us work through that stress or the anxiety or anything that comes from feeling alone or lonely. Find those things that you like to do, that creative energy. And I remember one of my late elders, that's one of the last things that always sticks in my mind, that we would be going through crazy things, trying to reach a destination or something, or trying to reach some ceremony, and there would be delays or there would be holdups or things like that. And he would always just say, keep creating. It's no matter what you do, never stop creating. So find those things that you like to do, whether it's music, creating music, singing, dancing, creating art. Like I just made these the other day.
Oh,
And that made me
beautiful.
really happy, it really made me happy. If you like planting, things like that, working with the earth, going for hikes, whatever it is that you can do to maintain that high vibration and that peace within your own self, and to be centered, to bring yourself back to that point, to deal with the craziness and insanity that we're seeing in the world right now. So,
I love it. So be creative. And that's what we are. We are born creators.
mm,
So that's what I was always told, is we are creators created by creators. So create. And I'm going to leave with that. So blessings to all of you. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned. My podcasts are Sunday and Tuesday at 11 o'clock Pacific time. But today we did an hour earlier. That was on my bad. I forgot that you were 3 hours ahead. And so I was thinking you
oh
were
yeah,
2 hours ahead.
I forgot
And so I
to.
told you 1 o'clock. And then I was like, wait, no, that
Whoops.
means 10 o'clock my time. All right, we'll just do 10 o'clock today instead of having to have you switch things. So I was like, all right, I'll just switch my time today. So that was totally on me. I don't know where I was yesterday. I was somewhere else. So um, have a beautiful day, everyone, and stay tuned for more um, upcoming with Stephanie and I. And blessings to you. Happy New Year, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right, see ya.